Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Bare and Brutal podcast, the podcast where we bare our feelings and are brutally honest while highlighting stories of resilience and transforming pain into power. I'm your host, Michelle, and today's episode is actually our season 1 finale. I didn't actually mention that to our guest today, but it is our season finale. I can't believe we've made it to 20 episodes and trust that we've got a whole lot more in store for you in season 2. Our guest today is a Vietnamese American who has channeled his life experiences into such powerful storytelling. By day, he excels as a business consultant, but by night, he pours his heart into screenwriting. He just bravely discusses his journey through suicidal thoughts and how this dark period has led to almost a creative awakening in all aspects of his life. His screenplays, they're inspired by personal and cultural narratives, and they've not only gained recognition in competitions, but also has just sparked meaningful conversations about resilience, creativity, and all that good stuff. So please join me in welcoming our guest. Thank you so much for joining us, Anhtuan.
Thank you so much for having it. And by the way, thank you for doing this, right? So I listened to your first episode ever after you reached out, and I was just like, man, it's game changing. And then the episodes that I've listened to since, it's a wonder to see so many people like willing to share, really to help other people. I think that's super cool. And thank you kind of like for facilitating all of that.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, you're the guest, but
No.
you're complimenting me. I always get I'm just grateful. I'm grateful that people are willing to be open and come on my platform and share their stories. It's been completely unexpected. Like I didn't expect people to actually want to come on here and talk to me about their feelings. So, I'm really appreciative, and I'll never stop expressing my gratitude for the guests in the audience. So, well, I know a bit about your background. Obviously, I did my research, and I would love it, though, if you could introduce yourself and just share a brief overview of what your current background is, whatever you'd like to impart on the audience right now.
Yeah, sure. So you covered it pretty well. I am Anhtuan Do. I'm Vietnamese, born in the States in my family here, and has spent my professional career in tech, right? So I started out in consulting, and then I went to a company that I helped essentially grow, not in the leadership position, but we went from near bankruptcy to Fortune 500, went and did some startups, and then now I run tech for an indoor vertical farming company, which is like super awesome, so exciting and fun. Never did any kind of creative writing at all, right? And so lived life with a very different kind of narrative. So you would hear that and think, man, this guy's got his act together. But you already mentioned it. I first thought about suicide when I was 12, and lived like that for 30 years, right? It wasn't until I turned 42 and some things happened where I almost did it. And luckily I didn't, right? You know, the universe conspired to have the right kind of sets of circumstances that I didn't. And then I did an intense amount of therapy. I was just lucky enough to find the right therapist. It took a few tries, but I did find the right one. And when it did, it just kind of like took off. And then along the way somewhere, writing just started to spill out. And so that's kind of like where these stories, the first one was very therapeutic because it's about my parents' story. And the other three are a little different. And if we have to, like, I don't know how exactly, I saw the questions, but I didn't look at them in detail. So it's just super interesting how the stories come. I say come more than anything else because I feel like I transcribe it more than I am actually trying to think of it.
Yeah.
And that's me.
Thank you. Thank you for, the highlights. You outlined your journey pretty well in your response there. And I want to take it back for the audience. You mentioned how your first thoughts of suicide came at the age of 12. I mean, that is super young. What do you think triggered these feelings at such a young age?
Well, like, I think some of my introduction even talks about it a little bit, right? Like, I think an expectation, being the firstborn in the States. My parents are also very, very religious, very big in their church. So a lot of people knew them. And so, and then we grow up in an American society, which is culturally very different. So I'm seeing what my friends have. I'm seeing what things are like at home. Also at a very early age, disagreeing fundamentally with the religion. I have a very different relationship with I see the beauty in it. I still have disagreements, so I'm not religious, but I am a very spiritual person now. And so I started to isolate myself, right? Like I started to, and I think all of us as humans do this to an extent where we have different sides of ourselves. But for me, I didn't feel like myself could be loved by my parents. And so I created a whole nother persona that was me with them. And then I did that at church with my friends who were probably the closest. And I just was not a kid that fit in at school. Right. So, in junior high, I was the kid that sat at the end of the lunch table reading John Grisham books, right? Like by myself. I didn't have any sort of like, connection at school. I was always isolated. And so I know like at that point in time, I was already thinking about it. There's like a specific instance that I remember today, like viscerally the first time I was going to do it. And that's in the 7th grade, which is why I say 12. If I'm being honest, it's probably before then. But like that like series of events, and it's just so rudimentary and so like, I mean, I'll share. I don't know if you want me to get that in depth
We're
with
here
this.
for as deep as you'd like to go. So,
okay,
whatever you are comfortable sharing.
Okay. So I'll try and make it quick. I am long-winded, so I will be one of the things I love talking. I love telling stories, and I love listening to stories. So I already said I was an isolated kid already in junior high, with the exception of my next door neighbor. He was my age. We were like super, super close. He didn't go to my school. He went to a private school, and we were like the best friends. And then there was a kid across the street who like also played with, did go to my school, but he was like the cool kid, and he really liked my next door neighbor. And so when we were home outside of school, he would hang out with us. That was all great and fun. That was kind of where I had my outlet still. And then my best friend moves away. Right. And so another family moves in, and there's another kid. This is right at junior high, like 6th, 7th grade, moves in. Clearly, like think about his path, like moving in to a new school from another state. He was more awkward than I was. Right. And so, he wanted to be friends with me. He did go to my school, and I did not want, I had this like, I think all of us do like this, I don't want to be friends with someone who may hold me back from a social, like maybe the popular kids will get to know me and it'll take off, there was no way. Right. Yeah. But that was still, so similarly outside of school, I would hang out with him. I would not really interact with him at school. And the kid across the street was like, that was it, like didn't really hang out with us anymore. And so like Halloween comes 7th grade, and the kid next door is like, you want to go trick or treat? It's 7th grade. So we're already getting old for trick or treating. But I'm like, yeah, sure. It's outside of school. I'm thinking it's outside of school. It's not going to be a big deal. And then, going to school, and the kid across the street, he comes to me at school and he's, hey, just so you know, me and my friends are going to jump him. We're going to beat him up.
Oh my gosh.
A trick or treat. And I'm like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. I'm not in any place to this. I can't talk to my parents about it. I can't talk to any friends about it. So I'm like, maybe he's just messing around. It's not going to happen. So I'm going to go trick or treating with him anyways. Right. And so Halloween, I'm like walking out the door. My mom's like, aren't you too old to trick or treat anyways? And I'm like, yeah, but I already told him that I go. So we go. And so I get out, we go, make it like half a block, and like the kid across the street and his friends come out and they jump, and I sprint home. I turn and I run home and I open the door. I'm like, you know what? You're right. I'm too old for this. So go in. And I'm like, man. Anyhow, so school the next week happens, and I see the kid, the next door neighbor, and I'm like, man, he looks okay. At least it wasn't like that bad. He looks like he's fine. So I'm like trying to rationalize it to myself. And he catches my eye and he looks at me. He gives me this look. How could you? And I think to myself, the one person that I don't want to be a part of his life, I screw it up. And so I'm like, there's no, why am I here? Right? Yeah. And so that's like the first time the first visceral memory of, thinking that I am causing more harm in this world. Cause this is a kid that I didn't even want to interact with. And somehow through my actions, right, I like betrayed him still. And so that was the first one that I think of that I can viscerally remember. And that's how life went for the next 30 years. Like, and it's not like that all the time for me, luckily, right? I speak and with other people too, who, have different variations and and I think I'm on the lucky side of this of like, it wasn't all the time. It was a lot of the time, but it wasn't all the time. But yeah, so that's why 12 is the number that sticks out. Yeah. Right. It's how many minutes are we in? And it's like bare and brutal.
I know. 12 minutes in, you guys. Yeah. No, I mean, that was a pivotal moment for you.
Yeah.
And the way that you can tell that story in such detail, and it's been 30 plus years since that moment. No, it just shows how much that truly affected you in that time. And
it's like, Inside Out, like the core memory.
Yes,
this is one, not a lot of joy, right?
They're coming out with an Inside Out
it's this weekend.
Yeah.
Yes.
Completely unrelated, but yes. I'm really excited because they're bringing in anxiety, and I'm like, that's me in a character.
Yes. Junior high. Right?
Yes. Back to your story. Yeah. Hey, if we don't laugh about it, we're gonna cry. But here we have both. Exactly. So
yeah.
For sure. No, I actually had a guest previously that I spoke to, and he also shared his struggles with suicide and his own attempts. And I opened up in that episode unexpectedly about my own struggles with suicide and suicidal ideation. And I can think back to around that same age too, 7th grade, 8th grade. And I think it's just a hard time, a hard age.
It really is.
I sensed when you were telling me your story that there was this huge sense of guilt that you had, almost as if your existence in your life was like a burden to others. And I'm curious, how did you get out of that mindset?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I know that's a loaded question, but
so I think, I mean, that's my therapist in the support group, guys. And it is like, I'm super careful about this now because what I realize in sharing my story, a lot of people share their stories, right? And their tools, and there are an infinite amount of like therapy, mental health tools, and as it should be, right? What are there, like 7 billion people in this world? So there are 7 billion unique experiences, like twins. as much as they are alike, you still don't know literally everything that the other one is saying to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that's got to happen. So with me, my therapist went through and like, he did this thing where he had us categorize all of our childhood traumas into like little golden books. You know, like those little golden books of like the Goldilocks and the Three Bears or whatever. He's like, you got to go back. Like in that instance, I had to go back and like relive that instance. I had to like, this feels like I was there. Like I was just like it. He had to go back and do that and like feel it all and like let all of those feelings out, because I didn't, right? I kept them, and that's what we're taught in society. Not, I know like men, yes, but like I think in general, people are taught to keep it in and like deal with it yourself. And then, so like I had to open the floodgates, like literal floodgates. And then I had to like close it off, like come to peace with it. And then if you can, or at least for me, like not only come to peace, but like come to the fact of like, I had to live through that. Like it was for me, not to me. And so even though it is still there, and obviously I still have those feelings, it doesn't drive my day to day anymore. Still recognize it logically, still there, but it doesn't have the same hold. Power. Yes. Yeah.
So you, if correct me if I'm wrong, you did not start this journey of healing and going back into these traumas and processing until you were 42.
Yes. January of 2023.
Wow.
I did. And I didn't, in 10 weeks, I did 400 hours, and it wasn't like 400 hours with a therapist. I did this at night on my own most of the time, the hours. He made me join a support group, which was essentially a bunch of other therapists, human connections, right? Like every single guy, and these guys are like they live across the world. And so, most of them, I don't know what they look like. We have a group chat. We share on calls, and then we will reach out to each other through Skype, essentially. And then we just kind of talk about like, hey, the therapy, he's saying do it this way. So like the thing I did next after the golden books was like these letters. And so I couldn't get it quite right, and I like put it in the chat, and one of the guys reaches out and he goes, you know, I do it this way. And then when he told me that, I'm like, oh, that clicked. Again, like the tools are different for everybody. And so then it went. So what my therapist did was he kind of helped me with the game plan. He's like, hey, look, you're categorizing your trauma. Like I helped you figure out a couple. You kind of know, go do it now on your own. Yeah. Here are some of these tools. There's 3 or 4. Try to find the right ones that fit. Use the guys, help you go do it. Right. And so I would meet with him for an hour a week, 2 hours a week. He's coming out of retirement. He's also trying to help me and then go back to sitting on the lake. Right. But then like I did it every single night for 10 weeks for 8 hours. Right. So 400 hours is actually conservative, but like once I got 1 or 2, I felt it was like step changes. I'm like, oh my gosh, it feels, and so it was kind of like addiction in a different manner.
Yeah.
And I couldn't stop. And I just kept like going and going. And I actually did talk with David, one of your previous guests. And I'm like, it's, you know, but I still do it today. Like the golden books, I still use that concept for everything in life, not just from childhood, things that happened 3 days ago, because we got to do it over and over again. He's like, and he said something like the ing is an act of doing. It doesn't end. You got to keep doing it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, David, you're totally right. I'm going to steal that line from you, but I will credit you every time. Right?
No, I love that you connected with a previous guest. That brings me so much joy to hear that you got to talk with him. And what you're saying about, this 400 weekly intensive therapy regimen that you threw yourself into. Oh my gosh, I am, after like an hour session with my therapist, I'm like, that was a lot. I
Yeah.
don't know if I can go back into that. So envisioning you doing that's crazy. I commend you. And obviously you're here now, and it was addiction in a way that was healing instead of damaging. So before this though, I want
Yeah.
you to
I think
walk us through kind of your lifetime where you didn't, were there other times in your life where you attempted to get help or considered it, or was it just
so I think I always knew on a level that I should get help. But one, I always rationalized it out. So some of it is just like not ignorance in like the bad way, but like the not knowing.
Yeah.
So I thought everybody in this world lived with suicidal thoughts. I thought that was a normal thing for every single person in the world. So that was not like a checklist box for needing help. And then when you would go to the doctor and they would ask you if you had, I was like, well, that they're asking a different question. And then honestly, to be like, I didn't want to go through the hoopla, right? Like, I knew that was going to come with a lot of stuff. I knew that if I did that my parents would ask questions, and I knew I did not want to deal with that. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing. And then in the world that I grew up in the 90s, 80s and 90s, people just didn't talk about. I think there's still a stigma in society today, but like back then, right. And I'm sure even before, like time has made it better. And I grew up in a time where it was not, felt like it was not accepted at all. And then later on, like Asian stereotypes of it or stereotypes is the wrong word, but like, come on, like you didn't risk your life to do this, and this, right? Like that, you're not dealing with anything real. So, it's that kind of stuff.
It's so, I'm glad that you brought that up, because I was thinking about reflecting after our first initial meeting together, and I was like, wow, we're 20 something years apart in age, and we experience very similar experiences and struggles growing up, being raised by immigrant parents. And that's crazy to me that it's generations are still feeling these same things, and this big sense of guilt for our parents' sacrifices that they made. I think I'd like if you could talk more about that experience for yourself. I mean, how is your relationship with your parents now that you've gone through this healing journey? And do you talk openly with them about mental health? Has there been any progress with that?
So that's a big question. So about this time last year, like I got into like the boundary setting, right? Like, so it got pretty rough at that point in time. But it was new to them. I spent 42 years of my life just saying yes to whatever they wanted me to do and lying about it most of the time. And now it was like, I am just going to be me, and I'm going to live my truth, knowing that they may not reciprocate, or maybe they would cut me out of their lives. But I just couldn't deal with it anymore. And there were some long, weird times there and weird conversations, but now we're in a much better spot. I just accepted the relationship for what it can be, which is, everyone just doing their best. Right. I know they love me. I love them. So like all of those. So now like the relationship is actually great. It's the greatest it's ever been. They know that I have done therapy. They don't know they don't, they're probably the last two people in the world that I would ever talk about the suicidal stuff.
Yeah.
They're like the two people I feel like that would break from something like that.
Yeah.
Now, should they find out, that's okay too, but I'm not going to go talk to them about it.
Right. No, I understand that wholeheartedly.
Yeah. But I mean, we go, I actually talk to my mom multiple times a week now, just to like, see how she's doing, make sure she knows I'm okay. I live up here outside of New York and she's still in Houston. So, we don't get to see each other regularly. And then I've learned a lot too about like just listening to how she grew up, right? Like they didn't have any point in their lives until they got to the United States. And even then they didn't have any point in their lives where they were not living with the firm knowledge that they would be alive the next day. They grew up in the Indochina War, and that finished and it went directly into the Vietnam War, right? So like, it was there's a survival. Difference in my level of empathy for what they went through.
So I know that in your therapy, you described to me that first session that you had with your therapist where you did where your therapist asked you to go back into these memories, and you told me that in that session this very vivid first scene of your parents' story came to you. Can you describe that moment for me and how it inspired you to start writing about your parents' story?
So it wasn't the first session I had with my therapist.
Okay.
This was I started in January, right? And then it's March 1st. So what is that? Like all of February, so it's like 6 weeks. If you think the easiest way to think about it is the way I think about it is just equate 1 week to a year's worth, right? If you're doing 1 hour of therapy a week, right? I'm doing about a year's worth in a week because I'm doing so much. So I'm like in years 5 or 6. And so my therapist is the one that actually goes, you know what, you've forgiven. It seems like you've forgiven your parents. You've forgiven yourself. You can start to change your inner monologue, your inner narrative. He goes, I'm going to bring in like a psyche. It's like a hypnosis, but it's not hypnosis because you're lucid. It's very similar to like theta healing that David does. Or like in schools of psychology, it's like EDMR, right? Like where you kind of like get out of this fully conscious ego state and into like a theta state. Very similar to that. And it's all focused on there are 4 like statements that I'm like focusing on, but the 2 that always stand out is I am valuable and I matter. That was like the first one. And then the second one that I always refer back to is that I am responsible for my own happiness, no one else's. Right? Like, so we do those 2 things. That's March 1st. And I'm exhausted. And you mentioned this earlier, every single day, like you're just physically, emotionally exhausted.
Yes.
Because it's taxing on so many different levels. And then, so March 2nd, I, see the scene, and it's a fictional scene. It's a scene that doesn't happen in real life. My parents actually don't remember what happens, but it's my dad's last night with my mom and sister in Vietnam. So just for everyone who's the movie is called Reunion, or the script is called Reunion, and it's very loosely based on my parents' life. My mom and dad are married in 1970. My sister's born in 1970. I actually aged my sister up 10 years because you can't have a 3-year-old act. And so my dad gets a scholarship to come to the States. He's going to go study economics, come back, and like help fashion government for a unified democratic Vietnam. And so 1973, he leaves. And then Fall of Saigon happens in 1975. He's like a month away from going back to Vietnam. Fall of Saigon happens April 30th. My mom and sister get stuck. Yeah. They totally lose contact. They don't know what happens to each other. And then in 78, my mom and sister sneak out on the bottom of fishing boats that are reunited at JFK. On June 16th, by the way, we're like days away from the anniversary of their reunion. And I'm born in 80. And so I always said I wanted to write that book, but I could never. Now I realize it was all of the other emotional stuff that kept me from writing. But anyhow, this scene pops into my head, super clear. I see it, and it's my dad's last night before he leaves. When he leaves, he's only thinking he's going for a year and a half, 2 years max, not knowing that it's going to be 5 years.
Right.
And I like sat there as a dad thinking about what it would be like to say goodbye to your kid.
Mm.
Yeah. And then say goodbye to your spouse for that amount of time. And so it like pops. And I'm not a writer. I'm not a screenwriter, but I'm just like, I feel like I should write it down. So I write it down. And in the next 14 days, all of these scenes come. Most of it doesn't happen in real life. And I just type, and it's horrible. It's so bad. The screenplay, I send it out to a friend. She knows a guy who's in the horror industry, and he like writes like horror movie scripts, like very low level. And he like reads the first like 5 pages, and he's like, "This is literally the worst screenplay I've ever read. Like, this is horrible. You're never going to get accepted to a competition." And I'm like, whatever. But then he rewrote one scene for me. And I realized it was like the mechanics of it. It wasn't the story. And so like I went and I like rewrote it, and I rewrote it, and I rewrote it. And now, like I said, it's placed in multiple I think it's like the count is like 17 competitions now, or 18 or something like that.
Wow.
And, I don't know what happens here. I just know that I read it, I write it, I send it to every single person that is willing to read it, because I'm convinced, I don't know movie people, I'm in tech, right?
Yeah.
But you've seen a movie, we talked about Inside Out, right?
Yeah.
And if you're willing to put in the time to read it, like, why not get the perspective of somebody who would watch it? And so I've sent that one out to like over 200 people. Wow. And have gotten incredible feedback. I'm on draft 28 right now of that script. Wow. Cause it's fun. I meet great people, and then they tell me fun stories, and like, I don't know. It's beautiful.
It is. It's now given you an outlet for connection too with people, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So these screenplays, they're not really, you're not like intending to go out and write these things. Like they're coming to you. Like they're almost like visions, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So I was looking through some of your other stories and some of the themes. There was the reunion, the one you just described. Love, 9/11, BLM. Can you help share some insights into how these stories came about? I mean, I know I listed like 4 of them, but maybe walk me through your process on how these memories are coming to you, or these visions.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you say it's memory. Cause I don't know if so basically what I talked about reunion, that's what happens with the other ones. So there's 4 that are finished. There's 13 more that I have like in my phone notes app, right? That I'm trying to like find time to write. But usually what happens is like circumstances in life lead me to different places. And then like one super clear scene, I just see it. And usually my first reaction is like, I'm not the guy to write this. I don't really have a 9/11 story. I'm not super, I mean, I am from a societal perspective with BLM, but I'm like, I don't have super, but there's like one scene. And then usually I end up like just asking like, what is going on? So in 9/11, for instance, and they're not real. They're like fictionalized against real things. So 9/11, there's the scene. I wake up that morning of June 5th. And I see a scene of an Arab American man, like true on American man, like colloquial English, born and raised. He's in the towers. He's a trader. He's in the tower, and it's already been hit. Everybody on the trade floor knows they're going to die. And he is like the calmest individual I've ever seen. And he's on his phone, but he's not being calm for himself. He's trying to calm down the person on the other end of the phone. That's all I see. And I'm like, why would he be calm? It doesn't make any sense to me. And I start to have like a conversation. This is what I think you're like with the universe, just call it that, right? Like God, like whatever you call it. I'm like, so what is going on? Why is he so calm? Like, I'm like looking around the room. Everyone is freaking out as they should. I know I would be freaking out. He is like the calmest individual in the world. That night, like the whole storyline of the movie is like, there you go. And like, I sit down and there's this thing when you write a screenplay where when you first introduce a character, you write their name in all caps, and a speaking character, you write their name in all caps, right? And then you like tell the age and you give like 3 phrases of what they are. And so the first character I introduced in the screenplay is his wife, and her name's Isabel. And I type ISO. And I immediately bawl. I'm like, because I know what happens. And I'm just like, how can I write this?
Yeah.
But I do, because, I don't know. I just feel like I should. Yeah. And then I send it out, and then I get feedback, and it comes back. Same thing with BLM. Same thing with love. There's this one scene, and it's usually a super painful scene.
Yeah.
And then it's almost like I can't not. Like usually it is like BLM, when at first I had so many self-doubts of like, you are not the person to tell this story. Like, how could I be, as an Asian American? Like, how could you be this? And then it's almost like everything in the world keeps slamming. Like, I kept running into like things in this world that would like be in front of my face. And until I like sat down, that one took a long time. A lot of these first drafts I've done in like 14 days, 11 days. That one took me forever, because every single time I sat down, it broke my heart. But it's like there's no resolution in that. In BLM, there's a resolution between the characters, but there's no societal resolution, because we don't have a societal resolution, right? I'm not gonna pontificate on how to solve the situation.
Yeah.
The whole point of that one is just, we got to start talking to each other with empathy. So the families get resolved, but the question is open at the end.
Yeah.
I haven't posted about that one very much, if at all.
Well, I think that, one, it's obvious how this is such an emotional process for you every time you sit down and write these things. But for me, when I read your screenplays, I see that there's this beauty in the brokenness of life in these scenes, because it's real. I mean, they're fictional, right? But these are very real experiences that people have gone through or felt. And I think that's why you have received so much praise and feedback from people, because they can see themselves in it. They can resonate. And I know your intention was not necessarily to, bring this message out for people, but I wondered, now that you've received this feedback from people and seen the impact that it can make, do you have hopes for future ways that you can impact others through your stories and your screenplays?
Yeah. I mean, I personally believe that they'll get made at some point in time. I will just kind of trust the universe or the world and God, whatever, in the fact that it will just happen when it's meant to happen. In the meantime, I love it. Like I said, I send these out, and then in BLM specifically, I sent out to people on the far right and the far left politically. Wow. And so many beautiful conversations I've had. Everyone's like, okay, yes, that's a story that all resonates with us. But then like, what I didn't expect is a lot of these conversations that I have with people who are strangers when I first meet them. We talk about it, and so many times they're like, it helped me process something. One person said after reading the BLM, she goes like, it's the first time I've spoken to my husband about this topic in depth, like the first time. Or like the night, like one woman, she's like, I read that script 3 times last week. I don't know why. It just helps. Another guy said, I don't think our generation ever really processed 9/11. We just like went into fear. And like, so something about just what I'm doing today seems to help, I think, people as they read it. And so I talk with them, we share, we laugh, we cry. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And then we come out for it better. And sometimes we will disagree on every single topic item. Mm-hmm. And yet at the end of the conversation, like we love each other more for it. And it's so different than discourse in general society today, where if you disagree on one thing, it's always like, let's get the pitchforks out. You're evil. And yet like there's one person I spoke with after the BLM one, like we go down the checklist. She is opposite of every core belief that I have when it comes to guns rights, because our conversation strayed. And somehow we like enjoyed the conversation, and like we still talk regularly now. I love that. And so if they don't ever get made, I will keep doing this, because this is, it's fueling, and I feel like I'm making an impact on a very small subject, but I also believe that like the stories aren't coming from here. They come from somewhere out there. Mm-hmm. And so why would it hold anything back? So like who knows? I'll leave it out to what happens, and trust that it will. And if not, it's okay. But it just feels like it will. Right. Yeah. So I'll keep doing it.
No, please keep doing it. It's so important what you're doing. And also though, the way that you speak openly about your experiences, I think provides a model for people like, oh, you know, someone that looks like him who seems like he's all put together and he's got it all is living his truth. You're living your truth, and you're being vulnerable and open about really tough stuff. And I want to go back to that though. You know, I know your platform isn't necessarily highlighting, you know, your struggles with suicide, and it's not meant for, you know, for you to be this like consulting almost. But I would like to know, is there a message that you would like to share with others who might be experiencing similar struggles?
So that's super interesting to me that you asked that question. And I didn't even see it, because I actually think that is my core purpose, is to tell that story. And because none of this other stuff in this world happens, my new world happens, if I didn't actually go get help. And so like my Instagram, I think is it's more my story than the movies, right? Like it's both. But it is, I don't know, it's more that. So, and it's kind of interesting because I write so many of those posts with the message being to myself. Does that make sense? So like I write it to the 28-year-old me who was going to do it because of X, X, and X. That was another very, very hard time for me. And the right people kind of came into my life right at the right time to keep me from doing it. So I write those posts. I write that sort of stuff to that version of me. Because, and that's the only way to, I think, really be truthful and to myself on it. But what I find is like that version of me exists a multitude over amongst so many different people, in the world. And so the 28-year-old me, and you actually talked about it earlier, was deathly afraid of getting help, you know, like, because that version of me, let's say I did, that version of me was so scared that if I open that door, what if I open that door and it's so painful and I come out and I still feel the same way? Because if that was the case, it was all for nothing. So I write it so that those versions of me say, hey, look, it'll help. And if it doesn't, another way to look at it is if it doesn't, then those tools that you learned, that you tried, that didn't work are no longer tools that you have to consider anymore, right? Go find other ones. But so my purpose, you cut kind of like pain to power or purpose, like is really, if you think that way, just take one step and go try and figure out your journey on how you're going to work through this. Cause like I said, everyone's unique in their instance. My journey is not your journey. Yours is not mine. But I'm willing to bet that if you take a step towards it, you'll feel a little better. And maybe at some point in time, you may not care about whether or not, cause I know I lived in that for a long time of like, I know it's not going to matter to anybody if I die. It's not going to matter if I don't exist in this world. And so I truly believe in my heart, in my core, that everybody does. And so what I am trying to do is, let's say that that's the case. And if you just need to hear it, I may never meet you. I probably will never meet you, but you matter of existing in this world to me. Mm-hmm. So maybe you just need to hear that now. And then as you work through it, it's going to matter to you. And so it's really like, go take that step. So I think it is actually what I meant to do here.
I am, I'm getting emotional. Because I remember feeling, exactly what I know that message was to whoever's listening, but I really was listening for myself because, man, I just wish that I had someone like you at that time when I was not wanting to be on this earth anymore. And that's important. And I'm stumbling on my words because I'm just blown away that you have turned your pain into this purpose. And, you're saying like, it might not matter later on, but it's going to matter for you now in this moment. That's powerful and that's needed. And the things that you've talked about thus far where you've made these connections with people, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, okay, is it like 1 million people? No, but you're impacting people, and you've impacted me. So thank you for coming on here and sharing your journey and your story. I'm 24. So I speak on my past as if it's way before, but like this is, when I think about it, it was like maybe only like 4 or 5 years ago where I wanted to take my life, and I don't really speak about this. Only a handful of people. I mean, I guess now people are going to know because I'm talking about it now, but I think I resonate with that feeling you spoke on earlier when you were 28. You're like, if I open up this box, like I'm going to get swallowed up by it. Like it's never, I can't come back from this. And just acknowledging like these thoughts is really scary. Like it makes it real. And I remember thinking at that time, like I can't tell anyone about these things because it's too much. Like this is scary for someone else to handle this. Like I can't even handle it myself.
Yeah.
So no, I thank you. Thank you for
thank you. I thank you for sharing that, by the way. Like it's hard. It's super hard. And by the way, you're doing much better than the first time I shared it. Oh my gosh, the first few times I shared it, I should not, like, one of my best friends, he says this over and over, and I quote it probably way more than he says. Like, crying comes with every emotion if you let it. Right? And so I obviously, I don't hold it back anymore. And I know it makes some people uncomfortable, but sometimes people need to see a man crying in the middle of public, right?
Yeah.
So, but anyhow, all the way around to say like, thank you. Like just listening to the ones that you've already done. I haven't listened to them all, and but I will like go through them.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's special what you're doing. Because you've got a purpose too. And everybody who is on so far that I listened to really does just want to make the world a better place, as far as I can tell. And they feel like the way they can do it is to share their own pain and past. Because why have somebody else live through that if they don't have to? So thank you for doing that. And thank you for asking me to come on. I love it.
Well, we are forever going to be connected now.
For sure.
Yeah. This is totally off topic though, but I'm curious, do you have open conversations like this with your children?
I don't know, like not exactly like this. So they're, I'm still a parent. They know that I was suicidal. They know I've done a lot of therapy work. They know, that is a constant work. Much like the rest of the world, I'm probably never going to share with them the childhood that I had, the details that I had. They don't need to think about that with their, they also don't need to, I don't think it's going to do them very much good to like live through what I lived through with like the thoughts. I think it's important that they know. And I think it's an important that they can always know that they can come to me with anything, so that I'm so open with sharing it that they come. So I don't talk to them about in this manner, but everything that I said today, like they know it. I may have brought it up once in random like things like that, but it's not like, okay, let's sit down. Let's talk. It's just like, hey, this is what Dad went through, right? Yeah. And now let's go get you to school on time, right?
I just asked that because I think about my mom, my parents, your parents, and how we didn't really get that growing up. We didn't get parents who would talk about these things openly and be an open line of communication. So, no, I think that's beautiful that we are healing the generations, and I hope that we can continue that.
We will. No, I mean, hope is a very important part, but that's what you're doing. Like that is what you're doing, right? So we are.
Well, Antoine, I believe we'll start wrapping it up here now. But before we go, can you please tell the audience where they can connect with you and learn more about your work, and where they can just find you to follow your content?
Yeah. So all I really have is the Instagram right now, Anhtuan.42. Although a close friend of mine, we're actually talking about doing a podcast. So, cool. but a very different kind of, it's we're toying around with like the Asian American experience in American society. She's Indian, she's South Asian, so both perspectives. Maybe you can come on ours.
Yeah, that's so exciting. I love that. Well, thank you again for coming on the show today. Again, I'm just beyond grateful that you chose this platform to share your story and allow me and the listeners to bear witness to your pain and now your purpose. I just want to affirm that, again, you are doing incredibly important work through your writing and just being so open to sharing your story and offering refuge to those who are struggling. So thank you again. This whole episode, literally half of it was just us thanking each other.
Yeah, right. And that, you know what, that That's beautiful. That's what the world needs. So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
those of you listening, if you'd like to stay connected with Antoine, follow along with his content and read all of his works in detail, please go show him some love. You can find all of his socials and links in the show notes. Thank you again, Antoine. And thanks everyone for listening. As always, I will talk to you soon. Bye.